So good to be with you today, Grant. We've really been looking forward to this conversation. Just to give people a little bit of your background, you're friends of Brian and Shannon Miles, who founded Owner. And beyond that, you're someone that has kind of walked the owner path in so many ways. You founded Speaker Lab, which was a company that eventually you exited. And I'm excited for us to get into some of that decision here today. I know that you live in Nashville, Tennessee, which it seems like anyone that is remotely creative that also has a lot of influence lives in Nashville, Tennessee these days. So you're right where you need to be, to say the least. And yeah, I'm really excited to get into this topic, but we've kind of framed this conversation through the lens of you are not your business. So what I'd love for you to do is just kind of share with us a little bit of your story, a little bit of your background, and why that story informs you being so passionate about this subject in particular.
Yeah, thanks for letting me hang out with you guys. So the nutshell is, if we go way back in time, I'm married to my high school sweetheart. That's the most important part of the story there.
Praise
We
God, man. That's
we
amazing.
started dating when I was a high school freshman. I was 15, and she was a 17-year-old junior. So come on now, we had a little salesmanship back then, and so we have three daughters. Live in a house full of women. It's the absolute best. But my career started, actually. I went to Bible college and was a youth pastor at a small church for a little while, and that gave me a lot of opportunities to speak. And speaking was one of those things I felt like I was good at. I enjoyed doing. I was speaking primarily to students, and then every so often I'd get to fill in on the weekend and speak in big church. And I was like, hey, I think there's something here. I want to do more of this. And so at the time, this would have been about 20 years ago or so, give or take. There really weren't any resources out there on the market of like, how do you actually book gigs and who hires speakers? What do you speak about? Like, how does it work? It feels like, but speaking for so many people feels like this mysterious black box. And it certainly felt like that to me. And so I found myself just emailing other speakers, stalking other speakers, harassing other speakers, kind of pick your brain sort of stuff, tried to learn whatever I could along the way, eventually started picking up some stuff and started booking some gigs. And so fast forward, and we got to a point where over the next couple of years, we were doing about 60 or 70 paid speaking engagements all over the country. And it was awesome. I really, really enjoyed it. And the downside was I feel like I got to a point where I felt like I had a friend tell me one time, was like, speaking is a high paying manual labor job, in that you get paid really well to stand on stage and run your mouth. But the nature of it is you have to get on a plane, you have to leave your family, you have to go somewhere. And for a minute, it seems cool. Like, I get to travel around, I get to go to all these cities, I get to sign autographs and take selfies, and people laugh at my jokes and stand up and applaud for me. Like, that's cool. But then you're like, I just want to go home. I just want to be in bed. I don't want to be in another airplane or in another hotel. And so it got to a point of going like, okay, now what? Where do I go from here? Because I don't feel like necessarily I have a business. I feel like I have a job. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I felt like I was just kind of stuck. And so at the time, I started having a lot of people who were asking me like, hey, you're a speaker. That's kind of cool. If I wanted to do that, how would I go about doing that? And they had a lot of the same questions that I had years before. How do you find gigs? What do you speak about? Who hires speakers? How much do you charge? How does it work? And at the time, there really wasn't anyone teaching or talking about that. There was a lot of people who were talking about, how do you create and deliver a great talk? How do you tell stories? That sort of thing. And I was like, yeah, but like, how do you actually book a gig? Like, how does that work? And so we started doing some coaching, some training around that. And that eventually evolved into what became the Speaker Lab. And the Speaker Lab was really what I wish I had when I got started. And we were teaching, how do you find gigs and who hires speakers? How do you put together a talk? Those sorts of things. And so it started with me just doing like a course and some coaching. We were doing some webinars and, that sort of thing. No intention of what it was going to become. It was just kind of, again, a byproduct out of what I was already doing in my own speaking business. And so we continued to build some momentum with that. And as it continued to ramp up, then I started cutting back on my own speaking. So we got to a point where we started doing, $1 million a year, and then a couple $1 million a year. And then we kind of kept doubling. And we got to a point where we kind of peaked in 2023. We did a little over $12 million in revenue. I owned 100% of the business. We had no debt. We were super profitable. We had about 40 team members. We were completely virtual. We were just cranking, and I was like, man, business is easy. I don't know what everyone's talking about. Like, year after year, we're just having growth and growth and growth. But I also was just kind of like, I felt like my wheels were starting to spin a little bit of going, I don't know where we're going from here. Like, this again started as something where I just wanted to help other speakers, and I know we were doing that, but also I didn't set out to become some huge phenomenal, enterprise or something or some billion dollar whatever. It's just kind of like, I want to help some speakers. And if we can help our team members along the way as well, that'd be a win. And so, in 24, we kind of stalled a little bit. We kind of hit a ceiling. Like it felt like we were grinding to make the same revenue and yet our profit was dropping. And then in last year in 25, the first half of the year was okay. The second half of the year was really rough, candidly. And we got to a point where we were losing money kind of month after month after month and going, crap, what is happening? It felt like I think a variety of different factors. Certainly things that were flaws in the business model that we can get into, and things that we could have done better. And at the same time, like I think there's more competition. I think AI was a factor. I think the economy was a factor. Blah 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 blah. Like everybody was dealing with those things. So it's not an excuse. It's just kind of the reality of like what we were dealing with. And I think again along the way, I was kind of going like, dang, now what? Like we've just been winning for year after year after year after year. And so going back to the initial topic, it really starts to cause you to question like, am I doing something wrong? Like, what do we need to change? Like I mentioned, I worked at a small church as a youth pastor. Then I started speaking, just kind of a one-man band, and then started the Speaker Lab. So at that point, I'm in my early 40s going, the Speaker Lab's the biggest company I've ever worked for. So it's not like I have all this Fortune 500 experience and I was like, I know how to deal with this and I know what to do. It's like, this was all new to me and just trying to figure it out and going like, where do we go from here? The other thing I think that was important, I think that again is relevant to this topic is going, I think some people get into or start their business or run their business through the lens of like, this is my life's mission. This is my life's work. I'm going to do this till the day I die. Alex, we were just talking about Dave Ramsey, like on his dying deathbed, he will be trying to get people out of debt. Like that's his mission. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have spent the majority of my career in the speaking industry, but I've never felt like this is the only thing I can ever do. I felt like I was good at speaking. I started speaking. I started teaching other people about speaking. And it was just kind of a natural progression, but never have I felt like this is it. This is the only thing I could ever do. And so I found myself at the end of last year just kind of going like, is this what I want to be doing? And like, what are the options from this point? And I remember I was on a fly fishing trip with Brian up in Montana last fall. And I remember talking with him a little bit about this, of just kind of going, I don't know what to do from here. Like, I feel trapped. I feel stuck in my own business of going, we've had a lot of growth. We're not growing. If anything, we're struggling right now. I'm not quite sure what to do to fix it. I don't I just don't know where to go from here. And so the punchline was we went on Christmas break. We came back from that. We were trying a bunch of other things. We still weren't really gaining any traction. And I remember a conversation specifically with Brian, and he had said he was telling me about a friend of his he knew who had built a business and got to a point where he just it wasn't enjoying it, just didn't want to do it anymore. And was like, I think I'm just going to close. And I think oftentimes for entrepreneurs, business owners, we feel trapped. Like the only option is you got to do this forever and ever, or you have to sell. Those are the only two options, right? And realizing, when he was kind of describing that, of going like, or you could just politely, fold things up into a nice bow and close the door and move on. And I kind of felt like, we were losing money a couple months, and we still had plenty of reserves in the bank, but also like, I don't want to just churn through that. We didn't have any debt personally or professionally. I didn't want to like get into debt. I'm not going to like mortgage my house, to try to make this work. This is the lifespan. I just didn't feel like that. And so I remember thinking about it, praying about it, talking with my wife, and I was like, I think I'm ready to just close the doors here. And so in like the second or third week of January, I talked with our leadership team. We called the team together, and I said, hey, we're going to close this thing. And I remember even talking with, other entrepreneurs and friends, like, you can do that? Are you sure? Is that allowed? And I just felt like, we're good financially. Like we're in a good place. The business has made a lot of money. We've made good decisions. We've saved a lot, invested a lot. And so we're in good shape. And also we're at a point in the business financially where like we can still fulfill everything that we owe. We can still pay everyone on the team. You just hear about those horror stories of people that are like, we tried and we tried and we tried, and now we have to file bankruptcy. Nobody's getting paid. Everybody's getting screwed. I was like,
Mm.
I don't want to do that. Like that's my integrity matters to me. My character matters to me. I want to treat people the right way. And so knowing like, okay, we can treat everyone the right way. We can pay everyone. We can take care of all of our customers. We're not going down in a blaze of glory here. And we can finish this on our terms. And so we started that wind down process. We did have multiple people kind of come out and say, hey, if you're going to wind it down, can I take over? Can I buy it? And so long story short, we did have two employees who ended up buying the business. And so they're running things now. They're doing great. I had a call with them last week. They're crushing it. I couldn't be happier for them. And I'm excited for myself to move on to the next chapter. But I think in all of that, it's definitely like a mind trip of going, how do I separate myself, Grant, as a human from the business? You know, people know me as like, the speaker guy or the successful entrepreneur and yada, yada, yada. But like, who am I when that goes away? When in many ways you could say, wow, it was super successful. We did $60 million in revenue, lifetime revenue, in 10 years over the business. We did, I think it was 11, $12 million in profit in that same time, so like we had a great run. And at the same
Yeah.
time, like you could be like, well, but did it work? You closed it, but then you kind of sold it, and so it's just, again, it can be this identity thing of, who am I aside from my business? And so that's a lot of detail. That's a lot of context. That's a lot of story. I'm sure there's a lot we can jump into, but yeah, that's the kind of the context of how we ended up here.
Yeah, it probably feels kind of wild to share a large portion of your life story in like under 5 minutes. That's pretty impressive, man. I know in the owner documentary, Brian and Shannon teach on kind of the framework of hustler, operator, CEO, owner.
Mhm.
They miss youth pastor, hustler,
Yeah,
operator, CEO, owner. So we need to tell them to add that step in there.
it's a
But
prerequisite. You got to jump
Yeah,
through
that's
the
right.
youth
That's
pastor
exactly
hoop.
right. I want to zoom into so many spots in this story. I legit think we could probably talk for an hour on each stage of this, but obviously we don't have time for that fully. So let's first jump into that chasm between hustler and operator. It stands out to me that you literally made a decision to say, right now, I am the product. And I'm going to jump this chasm to where the product is not me and my time and my energy. The product is something else. You kind of talked about that as like a 60-second thing in that overview that you did. Was that in itself a little bit of an identity crisis? Was that really hard for you to let go of? Or what was that decision like whenever you made that decision? And what was the framework that you were looking through? Did you have business background to think about your business as an asset, or how did you kind of come to that conclusion?
Yeah, I think that again that epiphany of going, this is not a business, it's a job. And I think of it almost like a surgeon. A surgeon makes good money for what they do, but you have to go do surgery. So I knew like if I take a week off or if I take a couple weeks, if I want to take a month off, like you're not making money. And so again, that's okay if that's what you want. And so I think I know, Brian and Shannon and many others talk about the idea of owner's intent and like, what is it that you want? And so I think it's so important for every single person watching, listening to this to be really clear and like, what are you trying? What do you want? What's the end goal? Beginning with the end in mind of like, what do you want to build toward? And so I knew for me, just being a speaker who's on the road for 80, 90 nights a year for the rest of my life just didn't sound appealing. Now, again, if someone else is like, that sounds amazing, that's great. There's nothing wrong with that at all. And there's certainly plenty of speakers who do that. I just knew, well, let me back up. There was one conversation I had that was super helpful. There's a friend of mine. I remember a speaker friend of mine I was talking to, and I was telling him, I was kind of like, I don't, I'm doing 60, 70 gigs a year. I'm doing the thing. I'm speaking at major events. I'm getting paid well. Where do I go from here? Well, now what? And he said a really good piece of advice. He said, Grant, there are some people who are born to be speakers. He said, I think you're an entrepreneur who happens to be good at speaking. And I was
Hmm.
like, yes, that I resonate with. So for example,
What did he see in you that made him distinguish you as an entrepreneur?
I think even the idea of with speaking, I was drawn to the business more than just drawn to the stage.
Yeah.
And so I've even told speakers like I enjoyed booking the gig more than doing the gig, like the
Yeah.
thrill of the
Okay.
hunt,
I mean, that's
you
a
know?
huge that because
Totally.
they're the people that I know that their full-time gig is speaking and they love it. Their least favorite part is booking the gig, I
Correct.
think.
Exactly. Yeah. And that's the case for most speakers is they're going like, I just want to stand on stage and be the dancing monkey, which is fine. I was just like, that's fine. It's fun, but I like the business, the operation side behind that. So I think that's one of the things that he saw in me. And certainly even what led to the speaker lab wasn't me going, here's how you tell a really compelling story. Although that was, part of it. It was more like, but how do you actually book a gig and how do you run the business of being a
Mhm.
speaker? That was the thing that I was personally drawn to and really what the Speaker Lab kind of evolved into.
So in some ways, stepping into like the operator role, it almost felt like natural to you. It aligned with your strengths, your gifts, your talents, all of that. Does that feel right to say?
100%. Yeah, very much so. And in fact, from very early in the building of the Speaker Lab, I was real clear. One of the things I would tell our team all the time is that this is not the Grant show. So even as I talked about the Speaker Lab, I owned 100% of it, but I never talked about it in terms of mine, my, I. It was always we, us, our. I would do onboarding orientation with all new team members, and I would say, "Hey, I know you just walked in the door, but you're just as much a part of this as anybody else here. So I may be, on a webinar or on a podcast or name on the cover of a book or whatever, but I tried to be really intentional to take me out of it as much as possible. So it wasn't this personality driven thing. In part just because I know that it's a healthier business if I'm not the only person who's doing that, but also like just from my own, I think, interest and intrigue. I think that there's, especially in the online space, there's just a lot of personality based businesses, which is fine if that's what you want to do. That was less appealing to me. I didn't want to be on a content treadmill. I don't like doing social media. I don't want to be like the star of the show. I think part of it was like, when I was speaking, that probably scratched the itch for a minute there, where again, I legit was like, I was the star of the show. I had a lot of standing ovations. I've signed thousands of autographs. I've taken lots of pictures. It's kind of cool for a minute, but after a while, you're like, again, I just want to be home. I would prefer, I had someone describe it this way. I would prefer to be the owner in the box that nobody knows than be the star on the field that everyone knows. Like I'm just kind of an introverted guy. I'm fine if nobody knows me. I'd prefer it that way. And so building something that wasn't like, here's Grant and a team of minions along with him. It's like, no, no, like we're all a part of this. And so we were really, really intentional as we built Speaker Lab for it to be that kind of structure.
And one of the principles that Brian has taught me that I feel like in some ways your story kind of articulates this is ego is dilutive to net worth. And I really think that could even be expanded into ego is dilutive to impact. And but it almost sounds like it's not even just like it's not like you were suppressing this egotistical desire. It's not like you had to like push that aside. You're just like, I literally don't want that. And that gave you the ability to build a brand instead of just a personality or a job in so many ways. Okay, let me ask you this. What were the decisions or the things that you did in those early years whenever you decided we're going to build a business, not a job, that you feel like maybe laid the foundation for the success that the Speaker Lab ultimately became? Like, what are the things that you think you did really well? And then we'll get into the harder lessons here in just a bit. But let's start with what you did well early.
Yeah, I think a couple things. One was trying to, it's kind of that adage of, replacing yourself, working yourself out of a job, as soon as possible. And so seeing like where am I the bottleneck? If I'm doing all the sales, for example, then we need to hire a salesperson. And if I'm doing all of the coaching, we need to hire a coach, and what are the things that I know that only I can do or only I should be doing? And so, I remember several years ago, I was working with a coach and he challenged me to do this kind of zone of genius assessment. And basically, you're talking to a dozen people around you and you're trying to read the label from inside the jar, going like, what am I good at? I don't really know. It's all right here. And I'm just having a hard time kind of sifting through. And I remember, several people said, versions of the same sort of thing. But there was one guy that worked with on the team. And he had a really good analogy. These are his words, not mine. But he said, in like the movie Ocean's 11, you've got the George Clooney character. And he said, Grant, you look a lot like George Clooney. That's not what he said. But he said, George Clooney's character was essentially to like, to kind of create the plan of like we're going to knock off the Bellagio, right? And then his job was to get the people. I need a explosives guy. We need a getaway guy. We need a locksmith. We need this decoy guy. We need these. And he said he did a really good job of getting those people in the right seats. And then he set back, not in a lazy way, but like I'm hiring you as the explosive guy because you know explosives. I don't, and I'm trusting you with that. So I think one of the things that I really subscribe to and I think was really helpful was the adage of just hiring good people, pointing them in the right direction, and getting out of their way. I always kind of viewed it like, I work for you. What do you need from me? The reason I hired you as a CFO is because you know finances better than I do. So what do you need from me? How can I support you? It'd be ridiculous for me to try to, dictate or tell you, hey, this is the accounting software we're going to use, or these are the financial models we need to run. Like, I want to best support you because you are an expert at that. And so cultivating that team and making sure that we get the right people on the bus, the wrong people off the bus, the right people in the right seats, and then trust them to do their job. And so I think that was the thing that I did well, and even, continue to try to be very intentional on, versus feeling like I need to be so meticulous and have my hand in every single thing, which actually I think can really, really hurt and hinder a business.
Yeah. One of my takeaways there is that I need to hire an explosives guy, apparently. That's what
Maybe.
yeah. Actually, one of my takeaways is I kind of want to go watch Ocean's 11 then, because I haven't thought of it through the lens of like, man, he was a great people manager leader and put
Correct.
people in positions to be successful in so many ways. Okay, here's a very practical business owner question I have for you. So when you're just doing speaking gigs, and like you are the product and service, my assumption is if you're doing 60 to 70 a year, you're able to charge a fair amount because demand is so high, and the profit margins on you delivering a talk are extremely high.
True.
Now we get to this stage where it's like I'm hiring a CFO or a CMO to take these things, and you're like cutting into your profit margins to be able to delegate some of that. Was that hard for you to be like, man, the way I think about this investment, or the way that I think about this asset and the way I invest our resources is changing? Did you feel any tension around that, or what did that look like for you?
No, 100%. Because initially for a while, it was just a bunch of contractors, and you're just kind of like hodgepodging this together, not only from just like a financial standpoint of going, this is what I can afford, but also like, I don't even know what I need. So yeah, I think we need this. So let's plug this person into this seat and see what happens. Right. But I remember we got to a point where we had a guy who's kind of a fractional, contractor helping with some marketing stuff. And he was, kind of had a Swiss Army knife where he was helping with a bunch of other things. And so he told me he was leaving to go do his own thing. He had this like side hustle starting to take off. He was going to go do that. I tried to get him to stay. It wasn't going to work. And I was like, okay, we're kind of at this crossroads now because I need to hire to replace him. So what are we looking for? So I start asking, or put together a job description and start kind of asking around, put feelers out. And so we had a bunch of marketing applicants come through, and there's one guy that was just like light years ahead of the rest of these guys, and I was like, ah, dang, we got to hire this guy. But he was like, this was going to be our first W-2, our true W-2 employee.
Yeah.
And he wanted six figures, like when profit share and da 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 da. And I was just like, man, that's so much money. But at the same time, I knew that he's so much better than the rest of these clowns. And so we got to figure out how to hire this guy. And so it was a huge risk at the time. And I was like, well, I want to bet on this guy. And he ended up being one of our best hires that we ever had, and was a huge reason for the level of growth that we had over the next several years. And so we also, one of the things that we implemented pretty early on was profit share. And so specifically with our leadership team, that was a huge, huge deal to me. Was even though Grant owned 100% of it, I never wanted to feel like, Grant gets all the benefit no matter what happens. Like that didn't sit well with me. So I love the idea of profit share, something I learned from Ramsey, of just
Yeah.
going, when we win, you win. And I just wanted you to feel it. So when we have a great month, I want you to feel it. When we have a crap month, I want you to feel it. Either way, I want you to feel it. Because as the owner, I feel it. I'm thinking about this at night. I'm thinking about this on the weekend. And so if you bust your butt and we have a great profitable month, I want you to feel that. You should be making more than the same regardless. And so that was a big deal too, just in terms of incentivizing our leadership team. And so we got to a point where we had a leadership team, myself and five others. All of them were making multiple six figures in comp. And there were certainly months where I remember a couple of months where we were writing profit share checks to them for $30,000 for 1 month, and my salary as a youth pastor was 29,000 for the year, and I was just,
Yeah.
so part of me is like, this is crazy, but honestly, it brought me so much joy to write these big checks to these team members because I wasn't the one doing all the work. Like we were all a part of this. So the idea that Grant keeps everything and they got nothing just didn't sit well with me. So going, you've been busting your butt and here's $30,000. Like that's enormous, right? So I knew what that meant to them. And I also knew that that fires them up where they're going, how do we do this again next month? Because this is a really fun check to get. And so just again, having that mentality of going, we're all in this together. How do we make sure that this isn't the Grant show? But because it's not the Grant show, how does everyone benefit from this? And so, yeah, we try to be really, really intentional about that and making big investments into the team. And I'll say even like, um, I so we recently started a new business and we're kind of like back to the drawing board in terms of like when you're doing, 8 figures in revenue, you can be like, yeah, of course we can afford a 6 figure role. When you're back to starting at zero and you have zero revenue, none revenue this month, and you're going, man, there was a gal I just talked to. There's a role I was looking for. We had kind of a comp range in mind, and someone introduced me to this other gal, and she was going to be like 50% more for the same role, but she had amazing experience, amazing track record, and it was a lot simpler for me this time around to be like, yeah, we need to hire her. And like it's going to hurt in the short term financially. But I know this is going to pay off big time. And so just investing in really, really good people makes such a huge difference.
Yeah. It feels like one of the things that you're highlighting that I would assume is helping you right now, but also helped you in the CEO role is you hired leaders like to kind of own their area, and then you literally let them own their area. You said like, this is yours, you own this. Let me know how I can help. Um, One of the things that strikes me is not everyone, that you put a job application out to has the same concept of like what ownership means as what you do. Like when you tell people, I want you to own this area, I think a lot of people come from a background and it's like, okay, but he's still kind of going to own it. I'm just going to do the things he tells me to do. How did you distinguish or discern for that person has the type of ownership mentality that we really need in the leaders on this team? Like, what were you looking for, or what questions did you ask to really distinguish who could be a leader for the way that you were building your business?
I think part of it was the type of culture we created. So, for example, we had three core values: people, growth, and ownership. Ownership was a core value. And it wasn't one of those things
Yeah.
that, like, if a lot of companies like, oh, we have our core values. And like, you got to ask anyone on the team, they're like, I don't, something, something, something. But I mean, it was something we beat the drum constantly. We talked about one of the things that we would do, for example, is we had a Slack channel where we would just do shout outs amongst team members. And people are always like, kind of, hey, shout out to this person in this other department who helped with this thing. And it wasn't like, one or two a week. It was like we'd have 20 a day that were happening. So, I mean, it was just a constant flood of just shout outs to other team members. And one of the things that would happen is we would always use a hashtag of one of those three core values with each shout out. So I'm shouting out this person, I noticed they really took ownership on this, frustrated, difficult student, hashtag ownership type of thing. And so we're calling out and we're connecting it back to core values. So when we talked about, from orientation from day one, like, hey, one of our core values here is ownership. It wasn't like, you're never going to hear us talk about that again, but it sounds good for me to say on day one. It was one of those things like we talked about constantly. And so it's just part of our DNA of that's where it tied back into like, this isn't the Grant show. So there were so many times someone would ask me, Grant, here's the situation. What should we do? And I'd be like, what do you think we should do? And like 90% of the time, I'd be like, that sounds good. Let's do that. And I think people started to believe like this isn't something where Grant's kind of ruling from some ivory tower and occasionally comes down to visit the peasants. It's like, no, 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 like I'm on equal footing with everyone else here. And I want you to be able to make decisions. Another thing that we did a couple years into the business, and this is something I remember Brian and Shannon did, was doing a 1 month sabbatical.
Mhm.
And the thought process was, I think sometimes sabbaticals get associated with, you're burned out and you're fried and you're going to go find yourself in the mountains. And it wasn't that at all. I felt good about life. And I was just kind of like, I want to stress test the business. So when Grant leaves for a month, what happens? What breaks? What fault does this whole thing implode? Or is this a house of cards that we are misleading ourselves to believe it's something else? And so took a month off and came back, and everything worked. And it was great because I think part of me almost felt guilty of like Grant's going to take a month away and then come back and people are going to be like, "Hey, how's a month vacation?" But I remember a couple I remember one of our leadership team members said, "We missed you, but we didn't need you. We missed you, but we didn't need you," which I was like, perfect. That's exactly right. Whereas I think the danger is some entrepreneurs, they want to be needed, right? They want to be like, no, no, but I kind of wanted things to fall apart so I could come back and rescue you and be the hero. I was like, no, no, that's not a healthy business. The healthy business is again where the leader can step away, come back and be like, yeah, we didn't miss a beat. We forgot you were gone. Where'd you go? Like that just makes a better business. But in order to do that, you have to put your ego aside. And so I did a total of 3 sabbaticals, those 1 month every other year for a couple of years, just to again continue to stress test the business to make sure can the business continue to operate without me in place, but also to uh, like very literally tell the team both with my actions and in other ways just saying like I trust you to make decisions. So when we talk about ownership as a core value, this isn't some like pithy thing that just looks good on a PowerPoint slide. Like I legit believe this, and the reason that you're here and the reason that we hired you is because we do trust you. So take ownership, have confidence in yourself because we have confidence in you.
Mhm.
Well, as we're recording this, my month off actually starts tomorrow as a business owner, which I'm really
Come on
excited.
now.
I was in a one-on-one with a guy on our leadership team, and he let it slip. He just said, "Oh yeah, and I've been looking forward to when you're gone so that." It's like you didn't mean to say that, but it's like it's such a gift and such a blessing whenever you realize not only can this thing survive while you're gone, but it can also grow. And like you said, I think it reveals a lot as well on the back end of what do we need to continue to work on and grow and improve. Okay, let me ask you, I'm going to ask you this in a very particular way. What are, and you can take some time to think about it if you need to, what are 3 lessons leadership lessons that you had to learn the hard way, that didn't come naturally, but you had to learn them the hard way?
All right. So one would be, I'd say, again, in reflecting in this last year or so, there's the scripture that talks about where there is no vision, the people perish. Whoa, turns out there's a lot of accuracy to that, as is the case with the whole Bible. And so I found that when I was fired up, when I was excited, when I was like, "Hey, that's the mountain, we're taking that. Come on if you want to go." That we were growing, that there was energy, that there was excitement. I found when I started to be like, I don't know where we're going, and I don't even know if I'm excited about that, that the business started to flounder and struggle.
Mhm.
And so I think, every entrepreneur, every business goes through seasons. And so I think just recognizing that, identifying that was healthy. Another lesson that comes to mind is because we were just growing year after year after year after year. I remember talking with another entrepreneur buddy, and they were kind of in a similar spot. They were growing, growing, growing year after year after year, and then they ran into basically a big legal ordeal with the FTC, and it ultimately like brought the whole company down. And great dude, Christian guy, and I remember talking with him about that, and I remember he said we were just growing year after year, and we bought into the myth that it was always going to be like this.
Mhm.
And I thought that was just like, oh, that's a good warning. When you're just growing year after year, you're like, I don't know. I guess this is what business is. We just grow year after year after year after year. And so then when you hit a ceiling, you're kind of going, oh, dang, I'm not sure. We hadn't experienced this before. And the longer that stuck around, the more you're like, how do we get momentum back? How do we get energy back? How do we get excitement back? So yeah, I would say that. And then, I mean, a third lesson I would say is something to the effect of like, we were really, really intentional with like taking care of our team and doing the right thing by people. But one of the things that was, I don't know, shocking or surprising to me is like people can be really invested in the thing while you're paying them. But when they're not on the team, like I was surprised at some people who just like they left and were like throwing shots at me or or just frustrated or negative. And I get like everyone's personal situation is going to be different. But I remember a couple times thinking, um, tell you what, why don't we reverse roles? I'll put you in charge of this thing, and I want you put your money on the line, and then you make the decision, and I'll sit in the corner and judge you. And just being like part of being an owner is it's really lonely. It's really hard, and that's part of the value of this community is nobody outside of this group gets what it is that we do, And so it's so important to be involved, to stay plugged into something like this, because you're able to compare not just the wins, but the lows and the wounds and the scars of talking with someone else and being like, "Hey, I really hate this, and everyone thinks I'm killing it, and inside I'm dying. And am I the only one, or is anyone else here? Or I'm thinking about closing this down, or I'm thinking about this, or I'm thinking whatever. And you just want people to be like, no, you're not crazy. That was me yesterday, and then give me a couple hours, and that'll probably be me again. And just the roller coaster of emotions that happen with entrepreneurship. And so even talking with my wife and I have a great relationship. We've been married 24 years. And I remember there were times where she was like, you don't have to do this, you could do something else. And the tension of also going, yes, but I want to be in the arena. It would be easier to be a greeter at Walmart, but I signed up for entrepreneurship and I don't want to be doing something else. And that means you got to take the highs and the lows, right? It's part of marriage too. Like, again, my wife and I have a great marriage, but we don't have a perfect marriage. There's days where like, this is shocking. She doesn't like me. She always loves me, but there's days she's like, yeah, if you could just stay a distance from me. And but marriage isn't always going to be perfect. Entrepreneurship isn't always going to be perfect. But like you keep showing up, you keep stepping into the arena, and you keep going, all right, I got my butt kicked yesterday, but dang it, today could be different. Let's get back at it. So yeah, entrepreneurship ain't for the faint of heart, that's for sure.
Yeah, when you were lonely, like at your loneliest or feeling most faint of heart, is there a particular message or set of messages that you most needed to hear or internalize during those seasons?
Yeah, one thing I reminded myself of a lot, I mean, a couple things come to mind. One was that we had this as kind of like a core belief within the speaker lab, and I would tell this to team members. I reference this regularly, is that who you are is more important than what you do. Who you
Mm,
are is more important than what you do. Meaning, like, who I am as a husband, as a dad, as a man, as a friend, as a human it's just way more important than what my title
mm,
is or how much is in my bank account or any of that stuff. Like this is all we're playing a game. We're playing a game called business, and someday all of the pieces go back in the box. But I know for me, like my most important roles are being a husband. My most important roles are being a dad to my daughters. Like my wife had a choice in marrying me. She's stuck with me now. She's got to live with that. Well, my daughters didn't have a choice. Like they just came out and they're just like, so you're my dad? All right, here we go. And like they're stuck with me. And that is so important to me to be the best possible father to them. Because they don't care, how the business is doing or not doing. They want a good relationship with their dad. And so that was one thing I reminded our team regularly is like who you are is more important than what you do. Now, that doesn't mean like, well, then forget what we do. It doesn't even, no, it does matter, but don't let it become the defining aspect of who you are. And the other thing I would say that really became true, I would say, through all of this was just having a trust and a faith in God. When things are
mm,
going well, it's just easy to be like, again, things are just going well. You can just kind of coast. You can just go through the motions and be like, I guess God's just blessing us, right? But when things are like falling apart and things are struggling and you're questioning everything, it'd be like, dang, let's test the faith now, and you feel like you're having this very small
mm.
version of this Job moment of going, oh, okay, so that's the hard part.
Yeah.
And so just going, man, just show up, dude, with your fishes and loaves and see what happens and keep showing up day after day. And so having a faith and a confidence of going like, regardless of how this plays out, I don't know, but I know the one who does know. And so my trust, my faith, my confidence, my hope is there. And it doesn't have to be in what I'm going to produce or not produce today.
Hmm.
Love that.
Man, thank you for
That'll
sharing
preach
that.
right there.
Yeah,
That I
that was
mean,
good.
Do you have a background as a youth
It's
pastor
been a
by
minute.
chance?
It's been a
Because,
minute.
yeah. Thank you very much for sharing that. I think that is valuable for me personally. I know that's going to be valuable for the people that listen to this. Um, so who you are is not what you do. If we were to think practically about like how do you re-immerse yourself in where your identity actually comes from? Like, are there rhythms? Because it can be so easy to forget, oh,
Yeah.
what I do is who I am, and the world will not even tell us that. And so, how would you go about reaffirming yourself where your identity actually comes from to make sure that that's the place that you're leading from?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if there's some practical answer of like, oh, if you close your eyes really tight for 37 seconds and
The tighter you close them,
you
the,
quote
yeah.
this mantra every day, that solves it, Like I don't know if it's that as much as I think part of it is just like a reflection over time of going, man, you remember that time when you were scared and it all worked out? And you remember that time where you felt like it was falling apart and it all worked out? And you remember that time where it felt like you were hopeless and it all worked out? Like, dude,
Mm,
take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And I don't know how it's going to be okay? And so I certainly felt like that of if we go back a couple months in January, and I announced to the team, we're shutting this thing down. And I had enormous peace and confidence about that. And I was just like, I
mm,
know that I know that I know that this is the right decision. And yet, a couple days go by, a couple weeks go by, and the confidence of that wears off, and you're like, so now what? Like this is all I've done for the past 20 plus years. So where do I
mm.
go from here? What does that look like, And you're staring at yourself in the mirror going, "No, what am I doing with my career? How's this? We have a lot of reserves. We don't have unlimited reserves. I'm not trying to retire. I'm not. So now what? Where do we go?" And so
Mm.
just going, man, think of all those other times you didn't know. And yet God took care of you and God provided. And so I would even say, um, like the past, my wife told me recently, like I started this new business. We're getting a lot of traction. It's going well. It's totally different than anything speaking online related. But
Can you share with us what it is at all, or is that
yeah, yeah, this is left field. But the nutshell is we're doing kind of an acquisition roll up of pool service companies. You know, just very
oh,
tangential to speaking and online
that's
business.
right. That is the natural next step after you
So,
own
and
a
I mean,
speaking training
I
company.
own a swimming pool. It's been in my backyard for 9 years. I couldn't tell you anything about it. I'm just like, there's a hole in the ground back there, and there's a bunch of water in it, and that's about it. But yeah, we can talk more about that another time. But basically, like, okay, I think we're gonna start going this direction for again a variety of reasons I won't get into, but also
Yeah.
going like, I don't know squat about pools. I legit don't know anything. So literally the other day, I went to a friend's house. He just built a pool, and he's like, "Hey, come see, my pool and see if you guys want to take over service for it." So I go over there. I'm kind of looking, and I'm like, "Yep, this is a pool, just like you said. You said there was a pool here, and sure enough, there's a pool here. I just didn't have a
Yeah.
clue. But
Yeah.
it is we're making some progress. We're getting some momentum, getting some traction here. We've acquired 3 companies, so we're at about 160 pools that we're taking care of. We're hiring technicians. We're building the leadership team. Like some of the pieces are starting to come together. And so my wife was telling me the other day, she said, the past month or so, you seem way more like yourself than you have
Mm,
in the past year. Now,
man.
again, that doesn't mean that like I've got it all figured out and it's all going to work out. It's just like I still don't know about pools, right? And I own a very fast growing pool business. But of just having the confidence of going, no, but I've seen this movie before. And so I know that if I'm not dependent on Grant and I am dependent on God and I continue to place my confidence, my trust, my hope, my faith there, I don't know how it's going to work out, but I'm confident it's going to work out.
Man, so powerful. Very, very cool. There are so many more questions that I could ask you about the stage that you're in right now, but I think that feels like a good place to pause. I'm going to ask you one more question related to what action people should take out of this on the back end, but there's a few announcements we want to make sure people in the owner community hear about everything that's going on in the owner community. The first thing is, man, we're so stoked for the leaders and business owners that have signed up for the Summit Within. There were a bunch of applications that came in, which is so exciting. Taylor sent me the list of names the other day, and man, there's some friendly faces on there. So if you have not yet submitted the application, man, I've seen the minute by minute for this time in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. It's going to be so powerful. Grant, I believe you're going to be there in Jackson Hole, Wyoming with us.
I
Is
will
that correct?
not. I will not. I talked with the dates didn't work. I'm already gone. However, I'll see Brian like 2 weeks after that on a different
There you
trip.
go. So you'll hear the
Um,
recap on it. Very
yeah.
good. Excellent. Well, myself will be here. I know the list of speakers that are going to be there is going to be spectacular. Amy Porterfield will be there. Yeah, Brian and Shannon will obviously be there. It's going to be such a powerful time in Jackson Hole, Wyoming. So we'll make sure we share the link in the Safe Harbor and also in the email to sign up for this. The next virtual event also is already on the books. You can get signed up for this in the email or also in the Safe Harbor. This is really going to dive into the topic on AI, and I think even goes into some of what Grant's already hit on some today of like, what does it look like to release the things that you cannot control? And then finally, y'all likely know this, but Owner is structured as a nonprofit. Brian and Shannon always say, like, we do not want to profit off of your pain. We just want to create a community where business owners can learn from the wealth of experience and wisdom of other business owners like Grant shared today. And so that if y'all are interested in being a part of the Safe Harbor community, you can make a donation of any size on the Owner website, and that will get you access to all of the seasons of content that Brian and Shannon recorded, also the documentary, and all of the free resources that the team is consistently creating to support and help business owners as they take the next step. So those are the things that are going on. We would really encourage you to make a donation. Grant, man, I'm so grateful to you for being part of this conversation today. Here's what I would ask you is the way Brian and Shannon kind of frame the journey is, hustler, operator, CEO, owner, and they say the space in between those is a chasm. And I know that there's so many people that are really resonating with owner content because they feel like they're looking over the chasm and they're like, I do not know what to do. And in some ways, they just feel like the only thing they can do is turn around or just sit at the edge of the chasm. I hear your story, and I hear the story of a man that has crossed several different chasms, even just recently. What is the word of encouragement or challenge or both that you give to the person that's standing at the edge of that chasm, Grant?
Yeah, I think even the way you frame that and describe that of going, hustler, operator, entrepreneur, owner, is that right?
Yep,
Is
that's
I'm
right.
going
That's
like,
right.
okay, see the trajectory. And in many ways, I feel like I'm starting over and we're back into hustle mode, right? And so what I would share would be years ago when I was talking with this guy, this speaker friend of mine, and he gave me that piece of advice of like, Grant, you're an entrepreneur who happens to be good at speaking. The other thing he said to me is, he said, just some of the best advice I've got. He said, you want to regularly find things in life where the challenge exceeds the skill set. Where the challenge exceeds the skill set. Meaning, like when I first started speaking, the challenge exceeded the skill set. You just feel like, holy crap, this is going to be a disaster. But what happens is over time is it flips and the skill set exceeds the challenge. I could stand on stage in front of an audience, do a killer keynote and be on autopilot and be really, really bored. And so it's kind of like when you're playing a video game, you're like, you just beat the same level over and over. You're like, this isn't fun anymore. Like I want to be in some type of situation where I'm in over my head, but in a good way. And so
Mm.
I feel like I'm back in that point now of going, again, as we've established, I don't know anything about pools. And so right now,
The
the
challenge
challenge
exceeds the skill set,
the
is what you're
challenge is
saying.
massively exceeding the skill set, right? I've had some success building a business, but I don't know anything about running a local home services business. I've never done that, right? So the
Mm.
challenge exceeds the skill set. And in a way where I'm just like, dang, I haven't climbed this mountain before. This is going to be fun, right? And so continually put yourself in those situations, continually look for those opportunities where you feel like you're in over your head. You don't know how it's going to play out, but in a good way, right? That's part of what makes entrepreneurship fun. That's part of what makes life fun. That's also part of where faith really comes in of going, I don't know anything about this and I don't know how this is going to play out, but I'm just keep showing up one foot in front of the other.
Man, well, Grant, thanks so much for your time. More than that, thanks just for the story that you've lived. Really appreciate you.
You bet.